If you're like me, you just hate the way you look on camera. The lighting is never right, the angle is never flattering, and you just can never seem to nail your smile. It sucks, right? But don't worry. This is why I sat down with Kristen Kidd, the owner of Lux Summit Studio, a professional photography studio helping entrepreneurs like you and me look our best and most authentic on camera. On this episode, Kristen will teach us how to finally crack that $1 million smile.
The more you think about, do I have the perfect smile, the less authentic it's going to be.
What poses can earn the most trust and likability from our audience.
We have power poses that are like our hands on our hips, body language 101, openness, right?
And how to finally get that dream lighting that makes us shine.
One common thing is that the coolness or the warmth of the lighting is off.
So let's learn all about how to look our best on camera together on this episode of Brand Science. Welcome back to another episode of Brand Science. I am very excited today because this is a topic that I personally struggle with a lot, which is just feeling like you are in your best light on camera or being able to just be like photogenic. And so that's why on today's episode, we have Kristen Kidd, the owner of Lux Summit Studio, who helps us do exactly that. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dave. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
For sure. Yeah. We've nerded out about this topic, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and really started to get into some interesting topics. And I was like, all right, let's press pause on our conversation because I want to save this for an episode. And so we're going to get into all of that today. But before we do that, what I like to do at the beginning of every episode, being that this is a personal brand podcast, is I like to understand my guests' stories and how they got into what they do today. So can you give us a quick idea of what your backstory is around photography and how you started Lux Summit and kind of where that passion for photography really came from?
Yeah, sure. I think the best way to bring it all together and the quickest way is, to share about how I picked up my dad's camera when I was 15 years old. And then from there, pretty much had a camera in my hand in one capacity or another. Started photographing professionally about 15 years ago, but that was in tandem with having a career as a social worker. And that was really important because I really wanted to take everything that I loved about being a social worker, which was to understand others and help others understand themselves and to see themselves in a way that they've never seen themselves before, right? To take those elements and integrate them into a successful photography studio. And so for 13 years, I had a primary career as a social worker. I built a career as a photographer, and then I was able to put it all together and see what I needed to see in order to step away from my career, resign as a social worker, and fully take on being a photographer. And so any genre that we photograph, whether it's brand or family or pet or boudoir or, anything, is all about helping people step outside of themselves and to transform the way that they see themselves and see those that they love most and the things in their life that they love most. And so that's what we do. And that has been the intention behind all of our work. And so past 7 years, we have owned our photography studio and built our own brand around that.
That's awesome. I love this combination of how you made that blend or transition of being a social worker, which requires a lot of like empathy and seeing someone past maybe what they see themselves as at the moment, and being able to help them kind of transform into something. And then you kind of, it sounds like you took that skill set and then applied it to photography, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a joy and, really an honor to be able to step inside that kind of sacred space for each person and to see how that shows up.
Yeah. Well, and one of the areas that we started to talk about a couple weeks ago that I want to start with is this idea that I was kind of telling this story about, when I look for podcast guests or even like when I get everyone's getting these, like, gets LinkedIn requests from like 100 people, and you kind of have to like eyeball their
Yeah.
profile, you know what I mean? So there's that, online, basically. um, what I like to say is your profile picture is like your logo, your personal brand logo.
Yeah.
And it really represents like how trustworthy can I take this profile on face
Yeah.
value, no pun
Mm-hmm.
intended. So, like when I'm evaluating potential guests, I'm looking at, a wall of profile pictures of people that I could potentially have on my show.
Right. Right.
And there's so many people that kind of the like sniff test that I have is, okay, what profile picture looks like they've invested into their brand, right? You can kind of make the leap where, all right, if you have like
Yeah.
this really glowing professional branded profile picture, you've probably spent time and invested into making sure that that was the case. So where I want to start is on the, because there's a million places where you can take this, but I want to start with like the profile picture and how to kind of capture the most authentic and like
Yep.
one that really makes you shine and expresses yourself uniquely
Yeah.
online. So imagine like I am a listener's coming into your studio with the goal of like, I need a headshot that just captures who I am, stands out
Right.
online, and like really
Mm-hmm.
makes me shine. What's like your process, and what are the tips that you
Yeah.
look to do in order to make that happen?
Yeah. So, the first thing that I tell everyone is, regardless of whether you're working with us or you're working with someone else, the difference is in the photographer's understanding of who you are and what you need. And so there's a million photographers that you can go to that are going to take a great photo of you. That's fine. And that photo is going to say, you have the capacity to be professional. That is it. The difference is when you work with a photographer, like with our studio, in which we won't pick up our camera until we have heard who you are and what matters most to you. And so we start everything with a discovery, really digging into who is it that you have to be for the people that you serve. Um, what is it that you want to project out into the world? What is the passion that drives what you do? And then also really practical questions of, okay, where are these images going? What are your marketing goals? Because, and we're talking right now about one specific thing, like the profile shot, right? Most of the people that you work with and that I work with have many marketing goals, right? And so these images need to go in many different places, and they speak to different people, different avatars, different clients, different peers, depending on what it is. And you have to create that portfolio of images that meet those needs. It's not just one, but when we're talking about the profile image, that's where you start. It's the first thing everybody sees, right? And so really working with a photographer that's asking the right questions, because it's not your job to know exactly what the image is supposed to look like.
That would come to you.
As the client, or as the person who's being photographed. And so, it starts with asking those questions and discovering who it is that you have to be for the people that you serve. And then a photographer who knows how to solicit that out of the person that they're photographing, and to create an environment that illustrates that point. And so I always use the example of we have photographed a comic book shop owner, and we have photographed a therapist. Their headshots should never look the same. We have two different messages. Now, do they have overlap of messages? Absolutely. The comic book shop that we photographed, his big thing was inclusivity. Like, this is a safe space to have fun and be yourself, right? And a therapist is going to be like, this is a safe place. Maybe not to have fun is not the message, but certainly to be yourself and to show up for yourself, right? Yeah. And so there's overlap, but it's important to understand the nuances and the differences in how to create imagery that expresses that, so that when people see it, they get a sense of who you are, your authentic, true, best self, your essence, just from that image.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of times I'll be, scrolling through and seeing different types of profile pictures. And I think different kind of facial expressions are given to each one. So it could be like a
Mm-hmm.
facial expression. It could be like the posture and all of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
What, how can we associate? Because for personal branding, like we also want to associate like a vibe of who we are and what you can expect from us. And we want that to be attached to, again, like our logo, which is like our profile picture. So we want our profile picture to represent like our essence. So what
Mm-hmm.
should we be considering when it comes to like facial expressions, like smiling or not
Yeah.
smiling, or like,
Right.
the proper pose, the calm
Yeah.
pose
Yeah.
versus,
Right.
what should
Right.
we be considering there?
And again, this really comes down to hiring the photographer that's right for you, because they're going to know based on the questions that they've asked you and what you need to convey. They're going to know the pose, the expression, and they're going to coach you in that as well, or solicit in a natural environment. Like those are kind of two different things. And often they're both needed, right? And so some people feel really uncomfortable about, oh, I don't want it to be overposed. Well, it doesn't have to be. Sometimes, we can simply, again, create that environment that naturally solicits. Like if you need to be lighthearted and laughing, like, creating that space that's fun and jovial, and then that comes out in the photos. And then if you need to have a more serious expression, then maybe you need to be like coached in that. Okay, we're just gonna like soft smile, drop this, whatever. But the photographer really should be coaching everyone in that and understanding what that is. And good examples of that too are like, lawyers and finance advisors and things like that, depending on their specific style and genre, may have a more serious and powerful presence and expression. And that's something that is going to be, coached and created by the photographer as well.
Are there certain like poses that give off more of a powerful pose
Oh
versus
yeah,
like a softer one, I guess?
absolutely. It's body language. It's like
Yeah.
body language 101. And so, um, we learn that folded arms mean that you're closed off, but in photography, that's not always the case. It can often mean that you just, that you're in control and you've got this, right? Which is what you want to see in your financial advisor. Like, I confidently can handle any situation you throw my way, right? And so a pose that says that. So, crossed arms can sometimes be that way. And also, body language 101, openness, right? With we have power poses that are like our hands on our hips. There can, your hands in your pockets say that you're maybe relaxed and that you're present and that you're open. Leaning in is a big one. Therapists, having a photo where someone's seated and kind of leaning in. Those that are in a workspace and a capacity of needing to listen more and be an active listener, then it may be that you're seated and that you're leaning forward and that, your arms are rested on your knees or on your leg. And it just says, I'm here, I'm present, I'm open, I'm listening. And so there's lots and lots. And then for us, it's for the angle as well that we shoot. Power poses can be shot with a slight upward depending on what you're trying to convey, but you got to be careful with that because it can, depending on how you photograph it, not be the most flattering angle as well.
Yeah.
So you gotta parse that out and know exactly what you're doing.
Sure. I want to actually explore there too, because I have, as part of something I want to talk about today, is kind of like how to look your most, I would say, natural on camera, but part of that being like, there's this the old school, like early Instagram days of like, the selfie, the high selfie pose, because like that's like your most quote unquote like flattering angle, is kind of, you hide the double chin type, all that kind of stuff. Are there certain angles and tricks to like how to look your best on camera, or there's psychological things like you're saying in terms of like pointing the camera a little bit upward might give you a certain vibe versus
Yeah.
downward or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And again, depending on how you shoot, I mean, the selfie angle, the quintessential selfie angle is not actually wrong in the sense of, the shadows, fall down, the light falls this way. And so it does kind of, it can be more flattering. And so also depending on the story that you're telling, though, you need to be careful and mindful. The photographer has to be careful and mindful about the type of angle that it is, because shooting down can in some senses convey a smallness that you may not want. And so again, like it has to be that professional really needs to, that photographer really needs to be showing up for them and knowing how to create that imagery that conveys that message. But I would say for the person in front of the camera, once they have found that photographer that they want to be working with, it's good to prepare our minds, right? And to come into a space of, confidence and ease. And if you trust the person that you're working with that's photographing you, then that allows you to be more at ease, right? But I mean, all the practical things of just getting your head in the right space and not listening to stories about yourself. We always hear, I'm so awkward, I don't photograph well, I hate photos of myself. Like nearly every single client that we have says that.
Yeah.
And we have 100 5-star reviews. So clearly, clearly people are getting photos that they like of themselves.
Yeah.
But it's these stories that we tell ourselves that don't really like serve ourselves. So the more that we can step out of that and just show up for ourselves, we really work hard to put our clients in a mindset of like how much they actually deserve this experience. And the experience not being so much about, okay, you are going to walk away with an amazing profile picture that you love, right? And you feel confident about. When people see that, you're like, that's me. That's who I am. That's a huge thing. People need to look and go, that's me. That's who I am. That's what I want to say to the world. Right. Or I didn't even know that was me, but here it is.
Right.
Yay.
Right.
And so just being able to show up for that and kind of like get out of our own way and to relinquish some of those stories that we tell ourselves. And what I was saying was we work really hard to put our clients in a mental space of that they deserve this experience and treating it as an affirmation of all of the work that they've done to get to where they are. So rather than it's changing the mindset and the reframing it from I have to do this, like, oh, I have to get a headshot, I have to get a professional photo, I have to get a profile photo, oh, I hate this,
Right.
to I get to do this because I've worked really hard to get to where I am. And I need for the people that I serve and that I want to serve to know that I get them. And they know that I get them because they see who I truly am in that image and through the imagery and through the portfolio of imagery.
Yeah. And I feel like it's a bit of like a translation, a visual translation of like who you are captured in, a visual format, so that, as you're saying, like if you have the right, if you're in the right clothing, if you're in the right scene, if you're expressing yourself how you naturally express yourself, then it's like the perfect postcard of like, this is me. If you want to know who I am, this is me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's signal sending as well. Like it's something that I talk about a lot when I talk about personal image is we get really uncomfortable talking about personal image because we feel like what we're saying is we're talking about ourselves. But personal image is not actually about you. It's not about being selfish. It's not about saying being self-absorbed or saying, look at me, look at me. It's actually about saying to your clients, to the people that you serve, to the clients that you want to attract, that you get them, that you understand them because you are like them. And you can do that through imagery, right? Like the entire premise of any advertisement is that we see that and we relate to it. We want to buy that product or we want to be a part of what's happening because it relates to us. and we being our own brand, are constantly needing to send signals to our avatars, to our ideal clients that, we get them.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that. So I use the example of like talking about like what charities you work with and your volunteer hours is not an act of saying, hey, look at me, look at how generous I
Virtue
am.
signaling or whatever.
Yeah, it's not about virtue signaling. It's about showing that the people that you align with who also feel passionately about that, that they get that and they see that as well and want to be a part of that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. It's very it's an unselfish act, is kind of what you're saying. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just,
And
yeah.
and how are they going to know otherwise? You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
like any relationship, you have to just kind of be open and honest in order for
Mhm.
me to be like, do I want to continue to follow you or use your
Right.
service? Do we
Right.
align in this? You know,
Right.
so
Yep.
you do need to shed some light on that. One area that I know I struggle with, and as we slowly started to talk about this, and I'm sure many of our listeners struggle with this, I think, is just like we do feel like we're not photogenic, and like we just can't find our angle or our smile or what have you. Like I just never am happy with how I look in a photo or how I'm smiling. And then there's some times where like I'm not even trying or thinking about it, and then like I like nailed my smile, and I'm like, what did I do there? Like, what did I do that time that I didn't do the 100 other times? So is there like, are there good practices? You know, there's the classic like say cheese, but I mean, is there good practices on how to find like a natural smile that makes us look our best when, whether it's
Yeah.
candid or, well, obviously candid is a little different, but if it's, we're posing for like a professional photograph or how we're trying to be on
Hmm.
camera and for social content and things.
Right. Yeah. I would say one of the best places to start is to um, let yourself actually have fun, right? And to let go of the stories and needing to be like, the more you think about, do I have the perfect smile, the less authentic it's going to be. But if you walk into that space as someone who's like, what, I'm just gonna have fun with this, like, let's just do it. And if you're doing something, you're moving around and you feel kind of like, you're like, am I nailing this? Am I not nailing this? I don't know. But you're kind of like laughing at yourself and not taking yourself too seriously. Like, that is also going to come up and show up, and it's going to be authentic. And for a good photographer, it's those snippets and those moments in between too. Like, we may have put you in this pose, but then you start laughing for whatever reason, and it just happens to come out,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to capture that, and recognizing, like, a lot of times I am looking for what is the thing that makes them crack up, or what is the thing that like gives them kind of a sense of ease, and seeing like, oh, this is going to be a moment where that happens. I notice when this happens, this person is very natural.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't tend to point it out to them. I just then create that environment in which that shows up and comes to life.
Yeah.
And so that it's just there. But I would say that for the person who's standing in front of the camera, one of the best things you can do is not take yourself too seriously and let yourself have fun with it, because your authentic self is just going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas um, if you come in your own head, just immersed in your own head of like, am I doing this right? Then that energy is what's going to like show up. So if you exist in that space, like, that's what's going to be projected out into the world.
Yeah.
And so being able to do whatever it is for yourself that helps you to feel as positively and as joyful and as at ease as you can before you step in front of the camera. And so for some people that might be meditation. For other people, it might be bringing a friend along.
Mm.
We have some photo sessions where, people bring a friend or a colleague or a coworker, and that person is always just like just getting them out of their own head and just helping them feel great and good and positive. And we always tell people that whoever's going to support you in what you're doing, then they're great to have there,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
I love the idea of like kind of getting out of your own head too, because I think this correlates really well when people want to create video content, and it can be difficult to just speak into a camera and you feel like you have to give a performance, and so
mm-hmm,
you get into your
mm-hmm,
head.
mm-hmm.
It's much different than obviously like speaking to just a buddy, at a bar
Right,
or something, right? So all of a
right.
sudden it's like lights, camera, action. Be someone. Be this
Mm-hmm.
persona, right?
Yeah.
And so you're too in your head, and you're not natural, and you feel like you have to perform like a script type of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I've found that over my experience with content creation is like when I just kind of throw that aside and I just drop the shoulders a little bit, give a little bit a looser language and like looser tonality, it comes across so much more like authentic and
Right.
enjoyable to watch. And it's like, you know, like the cringy word, but like, you're less cringy because you feel like, oh, it's just Dave talking to me. So it's
Right.
like similar to I think what you're saying here is like, if you want a great smile, if you want a great moment, a photographic moment, you can't try for it. You just kind of have to like be your
Yeah.
natural self.
And I think that the advice to act as though you're talking to a friend, that was advice that was given to me about public speaking as well. And I have found it to be tremendously helpful to remind myself, even when I feel like confident and like, sure, I've got this is fine. But the reminder of the tonality to be that I'm just talking to a friend,
Yeah.
just makes it so. And I do that too for like live casts. Sometimes I'll kind of be running through and having a good idea and being intentional about what it is that you're saying and your message. Of course, you wanna know that and have that, but um, when it comes time to turn the camera on, just that reminder of like, how would I sound if I was just talking to my friends?
Mhm.
Like, oh, hey, I'm super excited. And we can tell if we're mindful about it and self aware, then we'll step outside of ourselves when we are talking to friends. Like, let's say you have a project, right? You have this project that you're working on, a book project, I'll say.
Mhm.
And your friends are like, hey, what's going on? Well, I'm working on this book project. And like, you're naturally excited about it and you're enthused about it and you're in a safe space because you're
Yeah.
talking to a friend. And if we become like aware and can kind of step outside of ourselves and see like, oh yeah, like this is how I share this with a friend, and then bringing that to those moments of like video, live casts, all of that, then it makes it so much easier.
Yeah. Well, that's why right now, I mean, no one, what, in fact, what I'll do is I'm going to take a photo of my setup right now and I'll put it on the YouTube video. Um, but there's I'm talking through I forgot the name of it, a teleprompter. And I have my iPad set up so that I can see you in the teleprompter and then the camera's behind me. And I
Mm-hmm.
initially wasn't doing that. And it was just like talking to a camera, and that made it feel stiff. And I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
like, it felt like I'm talking to an inanimate object or whatever, right? But now I feel like I'm talking to you, right? So I'm having a conversation and it
Yeah.
feels like more natural. And there just happens to be a camera that's like recording the conversation as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So another area when it comes to capturing like a great moment, and whether it be video or photography, is I think a large part would probably be like lighting. I know a lot of people struggle with this. Um, what can you talk about when it comes to like finding great lighting for us? You mentioned kind of like the angles, like the top angle and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
facial lighting and all that kind of stuff. What
Mm-hmm.
are some of the mistakes people are making there, and how can we fix that?
Yeah. Again, when you are choosing your photographer to work with, you really this is actually where you get what you pay for a lot of times. And this is where like getting your friend who knows how to use a camera is not normally going to produce what you need when what you're trying to do is like have that, like, this is me, my authentic self. And when we're talking about lighting as well, there are a lot of professional images that look pretty good, but one common thing is that the coolness or the warmth of the lighting is off. And so looking at the photo, I saw this the other day and I was like, it drives me nuts. I was like looking at something that was printed on. Could have been the printing, but could have been also the photo itself, the photographer who did it. But I was like, this drives me nuts how blue this photo is. And now that I said this, everyone who's watching this is going to see, every time they're looking at headshots, they're going to be like, that is, and you can like compare them, you know, get, like you say, if you're looking at like people to interview on a podcast and you're going through and you're like, oh, well, this is, you know, there are so many that are like sometimes too warm, oftentimes too cool, so bluer lighting, and
Yeah, I
you're
was gonna say,
like, this is
can you
just
define warm and cool?
yeah. So a good example of warm light is kind of the light that's hitting you. It's more natural light. Like, of course, you can have that kind of imitated through professional lighting as well, but it looks a little bit warmer and yellowish. And then cooler light being bluer light. And sometimes when people are in a studio and there's professional lighting and only professional lighting, given the experience of the photographer and their skill level, they might create a professional photo, but to look at it like it's too blue. The person looks a little palish. It's just not extremely flattering. If you're taking photos of yourself to fill in for your like social media, then natural diffused light is always the way to go and always the safest way. And natural diffused light is the light that people are viewing us in right now. Or do you have a fill light on?
I was going to say, this is why I need your help with that lighting question, because I live in an apartment that has like floor to ceiling windows, and the sun comes like right across it in the afternoon. So like it just gets blown
Intense.
with sunlight. And then I have soft lights as well. And so I don't know how to angle these things. Like right now, I feel like I'm completely too lit up. So I'm still struggling with this.
Yeah. It is. And I mean, that's why, you know, again, if we're talking about the profile picture, find a photographer that you like, know, and trust, and make sure that they ask you all the right questions, because then they're going to get the lighting right and they're going to nail who you are as an individual. When we're kind of like supplementing our own imagery and using our phone or whatever to kind of like fill in, because we always, I mean, even our own studio fills in the gaps with storytelling, you know, day-to-day storytelling, like I'm here, and we use our phones. We don't use our professional cameras for every single thing that we post about our brand. But you know, the diffused natural light, diffused meaning that like for people out there, the harsh direct light is unforgiving, and diffused light just means that the light is like being diffused through clouds sometimes, if it's a cloudy day like it is today, or it's bouncing off of like white walls. So that's what you're seeing right here, right now, is I have no supplemental lighting. I am in a white room and it is a cloudy day. So all of the light is diffused. So it's like fairly even. So, you know, that's, you know, if you're doing some of those photos yourself, then I would say that would be my takeaway. Otherwise, invest in a photographer that actually knows how to do correct lighting that doesn't make you look washed out or like a Smurf or blown out or or anything like that.
I've you know, I invested into like a professional camera besides my iPhone, like a Sony, the Sony ZV-E10, and the first thing I wanted to do was try to take my own headshot with it. And I remember like trying to set up this background and then find the right lighting from the window and all this kind of stuff. And I took like a million pictures, and the lighting was just terrible. And I think there's also, if you have a professional camera, you have to know probably like settings and stuff about like how to set all
Yeah.
that up too.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, it's not just like. I mean, for years I photographed only ambient light, only natural light, and it's only been in more recent years that I started using lighting. And then Dave, who owns the studio with me, he's really even more of a master at it than I am. It's really like his jam. He
Yeah.
loves it, and so it's not one size fits all. Like, you know, um, different photographers, professional photographers, have different skill levels with it, and you do need to. It's not simply like, okay, I know how to work a camera. It's like you need photography is needing to know how light works. Like that is literally what it is. It is the travel. It is how light shapes around an image,
Yeah.
and that is what you create.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Um, One area too, with when it comes to kind of capturing something that defines you, I guess, is also the elements of a photo that aren't just you. I assume there's like backdrops and
Mm.
scenes
The
and stuff.
environment.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
environment. So
Yeah.
what should we be considering when
Mm.
we want to make sure that like we're capturing a
Mm-hmm.
scene or backdrop? Because
Mm-hmm.
even like now, this is more for like video stuff, but I try to like have a backdrop,
Yeah.
that
You got some
represents me.
comic books. You got some medals
I
back
got it. I don't know
there.
if you can see the guitar over there. So like this all like
Yeah.
represents me,
Yeah.
which I think is good. But
Right.
also like,
Right. Right.
is there such thing as being too busy? Because that's something I worry about with this backdrop. So like, what should we be considering when it comes to
What's the
the
balance? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. Definitely. You don't want so much going on that it is confusing, or the people are losing the point, right? Because it's like so busy that you're like, you don't even like know where to have your eye go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything has to be really set up really intentionally. Again, good photographers going to help you do that. Going to be like, nope, we're going to leave this out. Let's put this in. And really like work through with that,
Mm-hmm.
or someone like you as well is going to be like, okay, this really represents the brand well. This kind of doesn't. Like all of this is too much. It's it's the same concept of anybody who's ever had to create a logo and worked with a graphic designer. I don't know how graphic designers do it. I was guilty of it myself, and I just crack myself up every time that I think about it. But I think the classic issue that anyone who is designing a new logo is the temptation to make the logo all the things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And logos tend to need to be simplified, if for no other reason than they're going to be like printed on many things and visual, and your brain has to just like process whatever that's meant to be. And often, the simpler it is, the clearer it is to the client what you're trying to convey.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I think I was like, it used to be before we Lux Summit Studio, it was Kristen Kidd photography, and there was like going to be a camera, but in the circle of the lens, then there could be like a tree of life, and there could be, and you're just like, just filling it. It's like, okay, let's
Yeah.
pare this down a little bit
Yeah.
here. And so it's tempting to do that too. It can be tempting when you're creating an image or a scene to video or to photograph in. And so I would say in preparing for a photo session or a video session, it's good to consider what your tools of the trade are, and also to consider what brings you joy in life. So those are two elements that are very representative of your brand, because your brand is not only like what you do, but who you are. And so when we're talking about the tools of the trade, for real estate agents that we've worked with, they have to set themselves apart, right? And we had one young mom who was a real estate agent, and she specialized in young families. So we actually had, and she was kind of like a self-proclaimed soccer mom. So we literally had her bring a soccer ball in, and her kids actually came in too. She had a family session along with her branding session, but her kids were part of it, kind of like holding the sign. There was a soccer ball. She had her foot on the soccer ball, kind of like, I got this, I got you, I know these families. Other tools of the trade for some people are their laptops or books that they've written, or whatever it is that you need with you in order to do the work that you do, notepads, or, it could be so many different things. And then what brings you joy for some of our clients, it's their dog, it's hiking, it's wine, it's, and you might bring those in and create and build that into the environment or into the scene to send signals that I'm like you, I get you, I'm a normal human being. If you're sitting at your desk with a glass of wine and reading a book that's on point with your brand, all of that creates an idea.
Yeah, I like the idea of these like props, but they
Mm-hmm.
are also representations of
I think that
you.
that's I think that that's really important. Like sometimes people will call, and whether we're talking about a family session or we're talking about branding, people ask us, well, what props do you have? Do you have any props? And we just tell people quite point blank that we don't have very many props. We consult and discover with each of our clients to see what their story is and what the story is that they need to tell, and what matters to them and their tools of the trade and what brings them joy. And then they actually have the props,
Right.
like whatever
Yeah.
it is, we build that into the photo session experience.
Yeah. So I want to end on a couple mistakes that you think people are
Mm-hmm.
making when it comes to showing up and trying to capture themselves on camera. What are some things that people should be trying to avoid in order to represent themselves best on camera, whether it be a video or a photograph?
I always start internally, um, because I believe that first we have to like show up for ourselves internally before we can do anything externally. I talk a lot about letting go of our stories and letting go of the self-talk that doesn't serve us. Um, and I think that's one of the most important places to start. So it might be that you don't deserve, or it would be too frivolous to have a photo session that you really love, um, and that you'll just do whatever, you're just gonna find whatever quick fix, right? And so, but those narratives of like not deserving, or that we talked about earlier, where it's like, I'm not photogenic, or I'm awkward, or, all of these things, first is letting go of those because they're not serving us and they're holding us back. So that's the place that I like to start. Um, the next space is just doing whatever to just get by. There's a point where you want to elevate, right? And we're always looking, how do we elevate our brand? How do we elevate what we are putting out into the world so that we can attract the best of like who we want to serve and what we want to do, right? And so I think common mistakes are to have simply a selfie as a professional image, is a mistake. I think to take photos from events and crop people out of them is a mistake. I think to utilize images that are years and years old, this again goes back to the self-talk, because we feel insecure about having aged.
Mm.
The bottom line is you're worthy now. You're worthy as you are. Or because you've gained weight, right? We hear that all the time as well. We tell people, you are worthy right now as you are. And whatever your goal is, if you have a weight loss goal, that's great. That's fantastic. Let yourself have this experience and affirm who you are right now, and let yourself have this professional imagery that says that you deserve to show how kick-ass you are in the world. And then when you meet that goal, come back because you're going to need a new headshot anyway.
Yeah.
So do it then again. And so I think, between the imposter syndrome and the self-talk and then the just skimping to get by or having crazy Uncle Al take the photo when he doesn't actually know what he's doing, all of these things are mistakes. And so just invest, like we invest in a couple things. We invest in so many things in our brand. Imagery and storytelling is huge and it's important. And we need to invest in that with someone that we trust to actually tell that story for sure.
Yeah. And get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And get it right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Kristen, this has been great. I know there's a lot of actionable tips that I can take because even today my lighting is terrible. So
it's not terrible.
But yeah, I'll be working on that for next episode. This is great. If someone wanted to learn more about you and Lux Studio, where could they go to kind of find a little bit more information?
Yeah, absolutely. So luxsummitstudio.com, and that's LUX. There is no E. So LUX Summit, SUMMIT, studio.com. That's where you can find us. If you want to shoot us an email, info@luxsummitstudio.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, all of those great places, and even YouTube. So check us out. And then I'll also be doing a series on brand identity, creating experiences for our clients that take them from transactional to transformational. And also a series this summer in our studio on master networking. And so if anyone has any interest in learning about those workshops, then they can reach out via our website or reach out via email, and I'll get them all the information.
Dope. I love that. Kristen, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.